There is a specific sound a city makes when it realizes it has been beaten by a technicality. It isn't a bang, and it certainly isn't a whimper. It's the sound of a 45-year-old code enforcement officer named Janice screaming into a clipboard while 40 Greyhound legs click-clack in a rhythm that sounds suspiciously like a drum march down the center of Elm Street. I didn't set out to become a local warlord of the canine variety. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to annex the southbound lane of a major suburban artery. I just wanted to avoid a fine. But if the city of Philadelphia wants to play letter of the law with me, they really should have checked who had the better vocabulary and the welding equipment. It started, as all great American tragedies do, with a piece of pink carbon paper. I was standing in my driveway, holding the citation like it was a piece of radioactive isotope. $500. The box checked was failure to restrain a dangerous animal. I looked at the citation. Then I looked at the dangerous animal in question. Barnaby is a pug. To call him a dog is generous. He is essentially a russet potato that has been granted the curse of sentience. He was currently lying on his side in the sun, wheezing softly, his tongue lolling out onto the concrete like a slice of deli ham. If you put a ham sandwich next to Barnaby, you would have to check for a pulse to tell them apart. Barnaby does not hunt. Barnaby does not guard. Barnaby's primary evolutionary defense mechanism is looking so pathetic that predators feel too guilty to eat him. "You have to be kidding me," I said. I wasn't talking to Barnaby. I was talking to the woman standing at the end of my driveway, who was currently adjusting a pair of sunglasses that were large enough to weld in. Enter Janice. Every neighborhood has a Janice. She is the eyes and ears of the Homeowners Association, even though we don't have an HOA. She is the freelance police. She drives a beige sedan that smells like stale coffee and judgment. She wears a neon yellow vest, not for safety, but for authority. And today she had decided that I was public enemy number 1. "The law is the law, David," Janice said. She didn't look at me. She was busy typing something into an iPad with an aggression that suggested the screen owed her money. Ordinance 402, Section B. All canines must be physically tethered via a lead not exceeding 6 feet when on public byways. No exceptions. "Janice," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "He's asleep. He has moved 3 inches in the last hour, and that was due to gravity." "He was on the sidewalk," she snapped, pointing a manicured finger at the slab of concrete. "The sidewalk is city property. That is a public byway. You were gardening. You were not holding the leash." "The leash is right there," I pointed. And it was. The retractable leash handle was sitting on the grass exactly 2 feet away from my hand. The clip was, admittedly, not attached to Barnaby's collar, but the distance between us was 4 feet. I could have lunged and grabbed him if he decided to. Well, he wasn't going to do anything. The most dangerous thing Barnaby could do was cause someone to trip over him. "Was it attached?" Janice asked. She finally looked up. Her eyes were devoid of soul, filled only with municipal codes. "He's a pug, Janice. He has asthma. He can't outrun a Roomba. Who is he endangering, the pavement?" "It's a liability," she recited, her voice taking on that monotone drone of a bureaucrat who has memorized the script but forgotten the music once. If a child rode by on a bicycle and startled the animal, it could lunge. It could bite. Failure to restrain, $500. You can appeal it at the municipal court on Tuesday, but I wouldn't recommend it. I have photos. She tapped the iPad. Time-stamped. I felt the heat rising in my neck. It wasn't the money. Okay, it was mostly the money. $500 is a lot of money for a crime that didn't happen. But it was the principle. It was the smugness. It was the way she looked at Barnaby, a creature of pure love and flatulence, and categorized him as a dangerous animal. "So," I said, stepping closer, my voice dropping an octave. "Let me get this straight. The issue isn't the dog, the issue is the tether." "The issue is the law, David." She tore the pink slip off her pad and thrust it toward me. "Physically tethered. 6 feet maximum, public byway. Have a nice day." She turned on her heel, sensible orthopedic shoes scuffing the asphalt, and marched back to her beige sedan. She got in, and I watched as she made a note in a binder before driving away at exactly 24 miles per hour in a 25 zone. I stood there for a long time. Barnaby let out a snore that sounded like a zipper getting stuck. "Physically tethered," I whispered to myself. I looked at the pink slip again. The text was small, dense, and boring. But I read it. I read it right there in the driveway. Ordinance 400 2B, restraint of canines. Any domestic canine entering a public right-of-way, sidewalk, or street must be secured by a non-retractable lead or leash held by a human handler. Said lid shall not exceed 6 feet in length. Failure to comply will result in a Class C citation. I read it twice. Then I pulled my phone out and looked up the full text of the city code on the municipal website. I scrolled past the parking regulations, past the noise ordinances, past the rules about how tall your hedges can be. 36 inches, apparently. I found section 402. I read the subsections. I read the addendums. There was a lot of language about leash length. There was a lot of language about human handlers. There was a section about muzzles for dogs with a bite history. But there was something missing. I sat down on the front step, ignoring the fact that my gardening gloves were dirtying my jeans. I scrolled up and down. I used the Find on Page function. I searched for the words limit, quantity, maximum, and number. Nothing. There was absolutely zero regulation regarding how many dogs a single human handler could walk at one time. A slow, cold grin spread across my face. It wasn't a nice grin. It was the kind of grin the Grinch makes before he decides to steal Christmas, or the grin a tax auditor makes when they find a math error in your favor. Janice wanted compliance. She wanted adherence to the strict letter of the law. She wanted physically tethered. "Barnaby," I said, poking the dog gently in the ribs. He grunted and opened one milky eye. "How would you like some brothers and sisters?" He closed his eye. I took that as a yes. The next morning I didn't go to work. I took a personal day. I had errands to run. My first stop was not the animal shelter. My first stop was Home Depot. If I was going to do this, I wasn't going to do it half-assed. I needed infrastructure. I walked into the contractor's entrance, the smell of sawdust and indifference hitting me like a wave. I found the aisle with the chains and ropes. I stood there, staring at the selection of carabiners, trying to do mental geometry. "You look like a man plotting a murder or building a swing set," a voice rumbled behind me. I turned around. It was Big Tony. I had used Big Tony a few years back to redo my kitchen. Tony is a contractor in the same way that Godzilla is a lizard. He is massive, indio, roughly the shape of a vending machine, and communicates primarily in grunts and cigarette smoke, even though he hasn't smoked indoors since 1998. He was wearing a shirt that said Tony's Contracting on the front and "If I can't fix it, it's broken" on the back. "Tony," I said, "I have a project." "I don't do drywall on Tuesdays," Tony said, picking up a box of screws and shaking it to check the weight. "Bad luck." "Not drywall. I need a rig." Tony paused. He squinted at me. "A rig? Like for a truck?" "No," I said. "I need a harness system, lightweight aluminum. It needs to be a spreader bar about 10 feet wide, rigid with attachment points every 18 inches, and it needs to be able to be pulled by a single human being from the center." Tony stared at me. He put the screws down. "You trying to plow a field, Dave? You get into agriculture?" "No, I'm getting into malicious compliance." I explained the situation. I told him about Barnaby. I told him about the gardening. But mostly, I told him about Janice. As soon as I said the name Janice, Tony's face darkened. "Janice from Code Enforcement? Drives the beige Toyota?" "The very same." Tony spat on the floor. "In the middle of Home Depot." "That woman cited me for a dumpster placement last month. Said it was 3 inches too close to the curb. Cost me $200 and a morning in court." "I'm going to ruin her week, Tony. But I need the hardware." Tony looked at the carabiners. He looked at me. A smile cracked his face. looking like a fissure opening in a granite cliff. "Aluminum tubing," Tony muttered, his brain already working. "Schedule 40 pipe would be too heavy. We go with aircraft-grade aluminum rails. We weld a central spine. Handlebars like a bike, maybe? No, a waist belt. You want the force distributed to your hips, like a hiking pack. If they lunge, you don't want to dislocate a shoulder." "They?" I asked. "You said you wanted a phalanx, Dave. A phalanx ain't one dog. How many we talking?" I took a deep breath. 10. Tony whistled. 10 dogs. That's a lot of torque. We need to reinforce the joints. Come by the shop at 2. Bring cash. And bring the ordnance. I want to engrave the section number on the main bar. Step 2 was the Greyhound rescue of eastern Pennsylvania. I had done my research the night before. Greyhounds were the perfect weapon for this war. First, they are large. A greyhound is essentially a deer that has been shaved and taught to chase rabbits. They are tall, leggy, ndaroy, and take up a significant amount of cubic footage. Second, they are surprisingly lazy. They are known as 45-mile-per-hour couch potatoes. They walk well on leashes because they are used to being handled. They aren't erratic like terriers or strong-willed like huskies. They are flowchart dogs. If walk, then go. If stop, then nap. Third, and most importantly, there were a lot of them. The track down in West Virginia had just closed, and the rescue centers were flooded. I pulled up to the rescue center in my minivan. I had removed the back seats. The woman at the front desk was named Sarah. She looked tired. She had dog hair on her sweater that was so dense it looked like a second sweater. "Hi," I said. "I'm here to adopt." Sarah brightened. "Oh, wonderful. Have you looked at our website? Do you have a specific dog in mind?" "We have a lovely female named Sparkles who—" "I'll take them," I said. Sarah blinked. "Take who?" "The inventory," I said. "Well, not all of them. I have a capacity limit based on the width of Elm Street. I need 10. Ideally, I need 10 that get along, are leash broken, and are roughly the same height so the rigging looks uniform." Sarah stared at me. She stopped typing. "Sir, adoption is a serious commitment. We don't just bulk sell dogs like we're Costco. These are living creatures with trauma." "I know," I said, softening my tone. I pulled out my phone and showed her the pictures of my backyard. It's huge, fenced in, mostly. Heated garage. I have the space, I have the money, I work from home, and I have a vendetta against a local bureaucrat that requires a platoon of very good boys and girls. I explained the plan. I expected resistance. I expected her to kick me out. Instead, Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Is this about the zoning laws?" "It's about Ordinance 402B, I said. "They fined us last week," Sarah said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage, "for having excessive barking during feeding time. It's a kennel. Dogs bark." "If you give me 10 dogs," I said, "I promise you they will be the most legally compliant, well-walked, and visible dogs in the history of this county, and they will make the code enforcement officer cry." Sarah stood up. She grabbed a set of keys. "Come with me," she said. "I've got a group of brothers and sisters from the wheeling track. They're tight. They move like a school of fish. You're going to love them." The drive home was interesting. Have you ever driven a minivan containing 10 adult greyhounds? It is like driving a vehicle filled with loose elbows and sad eyes. Every time I hit the brakes, I heard a chorus of sighs. Every time I turned a corner, a shifting mass of brindle and fawn fur slid across the floor. I got them home. I unloaded them into the backyard. It was majestic. There was Buster, a brindle male who looked like he had seen things. There was Luna, a white female who immediately found the softest patch of grass and collapsed. There was Rocket, Flash, Speedy, ironically the slowest, Duchess, Earl, T-Bone, Soup, and Dave Jr. I didn't name him, he came with the name, and it felt like destiny. Barnaby waddled out to greet them. He looked at the forest of legs. He looked up at the towering snouts. He sniffed Buster's ankle. Buster looked down, confused by the potato creature, and gave him a polite lick on the head. The pack was accepted. That night my house was not a home. It was a dormitory. I laid out dog beds in the living room. It looked like a field hospital during the Civil War, but with more squeaky toys. The next morning, I went to Big Tony's shop. Tony had outdone himself. "Behold," Tony said, gesturing to the workbench. It was beautiful. A 10-foot-wide bar made of brushed aluminum. It had a central connection point that hooked into a heavy-duty waist belt, the kind used by deep-sea fishermen to reel in marlins. Along the bar, spaced perfectly, were 10 carabiner clips. "I weighted it," Tony said. "It's balanced. I added quick-release toggles in case of emergency, like a squirrel. And look at this." He pointed to the center of the bar. There, laser-etched into the metal in a Gothic font, was "Compliant per Ord, 402B." "Tony," I said, tearing up slightly. "It's a masterpiece." "I also made the leashes," Tony said, handing me a bundle of nylon. "I measured them. 5 feet, 11 inches exactly. If she measures these, she's gonna find they are 1 inch short of the maximum. We leave nothing to chance." I paid Tony. It cost more than the fine. It cost more than the fence I wanted to build. But you cannot put a price on spite. We spent the next 3 days training. You cannot simply strap 10 dogs to a rigid bar and expect magic. You need drill sergeant energy. I took them to the backyard. I strapped on the belt. I clicked the bar into place. I hooked them up. "Forward," I commanded. They looked at me. "Mush." I tried. Nothing. Then, I rustled a bag of freeze-dried liver treats. Snap. 10 heads turned. We began to move. At first, it was chaotic. Buster wanted to go left. Luna wanted to go right. The bar clanged, but greyhounds are herd animals. They raced together. They understand the physics of the pack. By day 3, we were a machine. I would step, and they would step. We turned like a bus. We had a turning radius of 40 feet. But we turned. I learned the formation. The heavy boys, Buster and T-Bone, went in the center to provide anchor weight. The lighter, faster females went on the edges to guide the turns. I looked at my reflection in the patio door. I was wearing a climbing harness connected to a 10-foot aluminum spar, towing a wall of purebred racing muscle. I looked insane. I was ready. Saturday morning. The farmer's market. This was the Super Bowl of suburban foot traffic. The streets would be lined with people buying artisanal honey and overpriced kale. The sidewalks would be crowded. And Janice always patrolled the farmer's market. She liked to measure the distance between the food trucks and the curb. I loaded the phalanx into the van. It took 2 trips. I parked 3 blocks away. I unloaded them. I strapped on the belt. I connected the spar. I clipped in Buster. I clipped in Luna. I clipped in the rest. They stood in a line, shoulder to shoulder, spanning the entire width of the street. From the left curb to the center line, we were a solid wall of dog. I checked my pocket. I had the ordnance, printed and laminated, hanging on a lanyard around my neck. I had a tape measure. I had a GoPro strapped to my chest. "Gentlemen," I said to the dogs and ladies, "today we walk." I stepped forward. The line went taut. We moved on to Elm Street. The reaction was immediate. A car coming down the street slowed to a crawl. The driver stared. He didn't honk. He just stared. He couldn't pass. The phalanx took up the entire lane. If he tried to go around, he'd be in oncoming traffic. I walked at a stately pace, 1 mile per hour. The claws clicked on the asphalt. Click, clack, click, clack. It sounded like rain. It sounded like victory. People on the sidewalk stopped. Phones came out. Are those dogs?" someone asked. "It looks like a chariot," someone else yelled. I kept my eyes forward. I was not looking for fans. I was looking for a beige vest. We reached the intersection of Elm and Main. The light turned green. We proceeded. Because of the length of our formation and my slow walking speed, we were still in the intersection when the light turned red. Traffic on the cross street had to wait. Honks began to sound. "Hey buddy, move the circus!" a guy in a truck yelled. "I am legally crossing," I shouted back, pointing to the pedestrian signal. "These are my service animals, emotional support for my hatred of bureaucracy." And then, I saw her. She was standing by a falafel stand, measuring the height of their sandwich board. She froze. She looked up. Her eyes widened behind her sunglasses. She took off her glasses. She squinted. I steered the phalanx toward her. We swung wide, taking up the entire turning lane, blocking a city bus. The bus driver didn't mind. He was laughing and filming with his phone. I pulled up to the curb, or as close as I could get, with 10 dogs abreast. "Good morning, Janice," I said. Janice stared at the dogs. She stared at the bar. She stared at the leashes. Her mouth opened, closed, and opened again. "David," she strangled out. What is this?" "I'm walking my dogs, Janice." You can't." She looked around. A crowd was gathering. "You are blocking the flow of traffic." "I am a pedestrian," I said, "and these are my pets. As you can see, they are all physically tethered." I held up the laminates around my neck. Ordinance 402, Section B. Leashes not exceeding 6 feet. Janice turned purple. "This is distinct disruption of public order. You have too many." "Show me the number, Janice," I said, my voice calm, projecting for the crowd and the GoPro. "Show me in the code where it says I cannot own 10 dogs. Show me where it says I cannot walk them simultaneously." "It's unsafe," she shrieked. "They are a pack. They are dangerous." "Dangerous?" I looked down at the line. Buster had decided to sit down. Half the line followed suit. Soup was yawning. "They are retired professionals, Janice. They are more disciplined than the city council." "I am calling the police," she yelled, fumbling for her radio. "Please do," I said. "I'll wait. We're not going anywhere, literally. Buster is asleep." The crowd cheered. Someone threw a piece of falafel to Luna. Janice screamed into her radio. "I need a unit at the market. We have a situation, a blockage, a man with a sled team." "It's a phalanx, Janice," I corrected her. "Read a history book." We waited. The traffic backed up for 3 blocks. The dogs enjoyed the attention. This was it, the showdown. The blue lights flashed in the distance. The blue and red lights reflected off the brushed aluminum of the spreader bar, giving the entire apparatus a discotheque vibe that I felt was entirely appropriate for the moment. 2 squad cars pulled up at angles, effectively blocking the intersection that I was already blocking. It was a blockade inception. Out of the first cruiser stepped Officer Miller. I knew Miller, not personally, but I knew the type. Miller was about 30, looked 50, and walked with the heavy, burdened gait of a man who had joined the force to solve murders and was currently spending his Saturday morning mediating a dispute between a screaming woman and a man tethered to a sled team of retired racing dogs. He adjusted his belt. He adjusted his cap. He looked at the traffic backed up to the horizon. He looked at Janice. He looked at me. Then he looked at the dogs. "Okay," Miller said, his voice flat. "For a nurse home. Who's bleeding?" "My sanity!" Janice shrieked. She was practically vibrating. "Officer, arrest this man. He is inciting a riot. He is blocking a public thoroughfare. He is endangering the public with a pack of wolves." "They're greyhounds, Janice," I said calmly. "And Earl is afraid of thunder. He's hardly a wolf." Miller walked over to the phalanx. He stopped about 3 feet away from T-Bone. T-Bone, who is a very good judge of character, leaned forward and sniffed Miller's holster. "Sir," Miller said to me, "what are we doing here?" "I am walking my dogs, officer," I said. "I received a citation on Tuesday from Miss Janice here for failure to restrain a canine on a public byway. I am simply ensuring that I am in full compliance with the law today." "Compliance?" Miller rubbed his temples. "You're blocking 2 lanes of traffic." "I am a pedestrian group," I corrected. "We are moving, slowly, but we are moving." "He's doing it on purpose," Janice yelled, pointing a trembling finger at the rig. "Look at that. That's construction equipment. He welded a barricade." Miller leaned in and inspected the aluminum bar. He tapped it with his pen. Clink. "It's a spreader bar," a deep voice rumbled from the sidewalk. The crowd parted. Big Tony stepped through. He was wearing a tool belt that looked heavy enough to anchor a suspension bridge. He was holding a yellow DeWalt tape measure like a weapon. "Who are you?" Miller asked. "I'm the engineer," Tony said. He didn't look at Miller. He looked at Janice. "And I'm the witness." "Witness to what?" Janice snapped. "The lunacy?" "The measurements," Tony grunted. "There," Miller looked back at me. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to disassemble this and disperse the animals. I can't do that, officer, I said politely. If I unclip them, I will have 10 loose dogs on a public byway. That would be a violation of Ordinance 402, Section B. Janice would have to fine me $5,000. I can't afford that. I am simply following the law. I tapped the laminated card on my chest. Miller squinted at the card. He read it. He looked at Janice. Is he right? Miller asked. The intent of the law, Janice began. I didn't ask about the intent, Janice. I asked about the text. Does the law limit the number of dogs? No, Janice whispered. It was a hateful whisper. But it limits the leash length. 6 feet! Those look longer than 6 feet! She had played her ace. Aha! Janice shouted, gaining a second wind of bureaucratic fury. Officer, measure the leads. If they are 6 feet and 1 inch, he is in violation. Cite him. Impound the animals. The crowd gasped. The tension was palpable. Even the dogs seemed to sense it. Duchess stopped scratching her ear and looked attentive. Measure it? Miller sighed. If it gets traffic moving. Janice lunged forward with her own tape measure, a flimsy little sewing kit thing. Hold on, Tony boomed. Official measurement. Independent contractor. Tony stepped into the kill zone. He knelt down next to the spreader bar. He hooked the end of his heavy-duty tape measure to the carabiner clip on the bar. Pull it taut, Tony commanded me. I stepped back. The line to Buster's collar went tight. Janice hovered over Tony's shoulder like a vulture waiting for a carcass. Miller leaned in. The crowd held its breath. A guy eating a gyro stopped chewing. Read it, Tony said. Miller peered at the numbers. 5 feet, Miller said. 11 inches. And 3/4, Tony added. 1/4-inch tolerance for humidity expansion. Check the others, Janice screeched. Check the white one. Tony moved to Luna. Snap, pull. 5 feet, 11 inches, Miller read. They checked Flash. They checked Soup. They checked Dave Jr. Every single leash was exactly 5 feet, 11 inches. Tony stood up, retracting the tape measure with a sound that sounded like a shotgun racking. Compliance, Tony said. He's good. Janice looked like she was going to have a stroke. She looked at the dogs, then at the bar, then at me. Her face was a kaleidoscope of red and purple. This is mocking the authority of the Code Enforcement Office, she yelled. He is making a mockery of the system. Janice, Officer Miller said. His voice was very quiet. Is he breaking a law? A specific written law? He is blocking the street. He is a pedestrian, Miller said. Pedestrians have the right of way in a crosswalk. He is just a very wide pedestrian. Miller turned to me. He tried to keep his face stern, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. Sir, Miller said, you are causing a disturbance. I am walking my dogs, I repeated. I am trying to get them some exercise. Barnaby needs it. I pointed to the pug, who was currently asleep in a mesh pouch I had attached to the center of the bar, because he had refused to walk after the first block. Miller looked at the sleeping pug. He looked at the 10 Greyhounds standing in phalanx formation. Move it along, Miller said. But maybe walk single file next time? The law doesn't specify formation, officer, I said, but I will take it under advisement. Get out of the intersection, Miller ordered. And Janice? Janice looked up, hopeful. Stop citing people for gardening, Miller said. I have actual crimes to solve. The crowd erupted. It wasn't polite applause, it was a roar. Someone started chanting, "Let the dogs walk!" A hipster filmed the whole thing on TikTok Live. I gave the command. Mush! The phalanx lurched forward. We cleared the intersection. The traffic began to flow. As we walked away, I looked back. Janice was standing alone on the corner, defeated, holding her sewing tape measure. Big Tony gave me a thumbs up and lit a cigarette. Violating the smoking ordinance, but nobody dared say a word. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. By the time I got the dogs home, a process that took 45 minutes and involved stopping for water breaks every 300 feet, I was trending on Twitter. They were calling me the Greyhound General. The video of Big Tony measuring the leash had 2 million views. People were making fan art of Barnaby sleeping in the pouch. But viral fame doesn't fix local government. On Monday morning, I received a certified letter. It wasn't a fine. It was a summons. To Mr. David Miller, you are hereby requested to appear before the City Council for an emergency session regarding ordinance clarification and zoning variance. Requested, in city speak, means, get your ass down here or we will condemn your house. I put on my best suit. I did not bring the dogs. I did, however, bring Big Tony. He wore a clean t-shirt. It was the formal one. It had a pocket. The council chamber was packed. Usually these meetings are attended by 3 people. The stenographer, a guy who thinks the government is controlling the weather with 5G, and Janice. Today, it was standing room only. The Let the Dogs Walk movement had shown up in force. I sat at the little wooden table in front of the council. The mayor, a man named Henderson, who looked like he was made entirely of sourdough dough, peered down at me over his glasses. Janice was there, sitting in the corner, looking sullen. Mr. Miller, Mayor Henderson began, we have seen the videos. They are very educational, I said. They are a traffic nightmare, Henderson sighed. We have received complaints from the bus company, Tridea, the fire department, and the Uber Drivers Association of Greater Philadelphia. Apparently your phalanx caused a gridlock that lasted 40 minutes. I was merely complying with Ordinance 402B, Mr. Mayor, I said, leaning into the microphone. Janice was very clear, physically tethered 6 feet, no exceptions. We are aware of the ordinance, a councilwoman said. We are currently drafting an emergency amendment to limit the number of dogs per handler to 3. The crowd booed. The mayor banged his gavel. However, the mayor continued, shouting over the noise, passing an ordinance takes 3 readings and 30 days. We cannot have you blocking Elm Street for 30 days. The city will grind to a halt. I have a lot of free time, I said, and the dogs need their exercise. We were planning a route down Main Street for tomorrow. Rush hour. The mayor turned pale. Mr. Miller, the mayor said, what do you want? This was it, the moment of negotiation. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket. I smoothed it out on the table. I want 3 things, I said. Name them. First, I said, I want the citation for Barnaby dismissed, with prejudice, and an apology from code enforcement. Janice made a noise like a dying kettle. The mayor glared at her. Done, the mayor said. Miss Janice will apologize. Next. Second, I continued, I want a refund of the $500 I paid, plus the cost of the materials for the rig. I have receipts from Home Depot. Fine, the mayor waved his hand. Petty cash. Next. Third, I said, I want a permit. I signaled to Tony. Tony stepped forward and slammed a roll of blueprints onto the council table. A permit for a 6-foot privacy fence, I said. Front and backyard. Setback variance included. No architectural review board oversight. Approved today, signed by you. The council members looked at the blueprints. They looked at the fence design. It was a nice fence, but usually getting a variance like that takes 6 months and a blood sample. If I get the fence, I said, I don't need to walk the dogs on the street. They can run in the yard. The phalanx is retired. The traffic flows. The city is safe. The mayor looked at the blueprints. He looked at me. He looked at the crowd of people wearing t-shirts with my face on them. He picked up his pen. If I sign this, the mayor said, do you promise to never attach 10 animals to a piece of aluminum again? I promise, I said, unless I get a cat. The mayor signed. He stamped it. He handed the permit to me. Meeting adjourned, he shouted. It has been 3 months. The fence is magnificent. Big Tony built it out of cedar. It smells great. It is 6 feet high, solid, and utterly impenetrable by prying eyes or Janice. The city amended the ordinance. You can now only walk 3 dogs at a time. They call it the Miller Rule. I'm thinking of getting it framed. I still have the dogs. I couldn't give them back. Once you have lived with 10 Greyhounds, the house feels empty without them. They are currently scattered around my living room. Buster is on the sofa. Luna is on the love seat. Barnaby is sleeping on top of Flash, who doesn't seem to mind. It costs a fortune in dog food. My vacuum cleaner has filed for divorce. But every now and then, on a quiet Sunday morning, I go into the garage. I look at the aluminum spreader bar hanging on the wall. It's scratched and dented, a relic of the war. I touch the inscription, "Compliant per ord, 400 2B." I smile. Sometimes you don't fight the law. You just follow it so hard that it breaks. And somewhere in this city, Janice is measuring someone's grass. And I like to think that every time she pulls out that tape measure, she hesitates. Just for a second. Because she knows. She knows the Greyhounds are waiting.